I was out there when BlackBerry decided to stop putting tissue boxes in the lunchroom because it was costing us. I was there for these crazy thought conversations, right? It's just like,
cut the tissue.
Bring your own Kleenex. You got a runny nose? Bring your own Kleenex. So it's some really wonky decisions that don't seem like sound silly, but culturally, you might just sitting around being like, yo, they just took all the tissue boxes out of the tissue, like the lunchroom. Should we be finding other jobs?
Turnover can cost your company time, energy, money, and impact morale. It's a killer. But in an economic downturn, you might not be able to throw around raises. So, is there anything you can do to retain your people when budgets are tight? This is the Culture Clinic, where my co-founder, Skay, and I are constantly learning from HR experts how to build a culture where people love to work. My name's Joe. I'm the co-founder here at Guusto, and today we're joined by Kwesi Thomas, an HR expert in rewards and recognition. Kwesi, let's get into this week's topic: employee retention on a tight budget. What's the longest you've ever stayed in a job, and what motivated you to stay?
I stayed about 7 years, give or take a few months at Nortel, and then I stayed about 7 years, give or take a few months at BlackBerry, so about the same amount of time. Be remiss if I didn't say both of them were definitely under some budget constraints during the large portions of the times that I was there. What motivated me? I had a lot of good opportunities and work to do, and I got to work with some really smart people at the time as well. So I think the mixture of those two things really kept me engaged. Both those companies were letting off a lot of people at the time, were letting go a lot of people during my time there. And though that was difficult to be around and then be a part of, I think for me, I got to pick up projects. I get to work on things that otherwise my, tenure or my job experience probably wouldn't have let me do. And so I think that work, the engaging work I got to do, was really good. And I think some of the leaders I was working for at the time were also really, really good.
So it sounds like meaningful work and amazing team members was a big driver to your loyalty.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And in fact, I know Shelly DaCosta sometimes does these culture clinics as well. At one point, Shelly was my leader at BlackBerry, and I got to work for her for a while. And that kept me there because, she was really engaged. She really trusted the work I was doing, and she was quick to recognize throughout the process for a lot of things. I think that kept me there as well.
So 7 years at a number of places. You're a pretty loyal guy, considering how retention or how loyalty has changed over time, right? Like baby boomers on average stayed with a company for about 10 years. Millennials are now less than 2. And that number's just going down with Gen Z. So
yeah, I like sticking around. I should be remiss not to say the Nortel one. There was another factor. They had a great education program. It was a larger company, and as long as you passed your course, they reimbursed you for the course and the textbooks. So I did my entire undergrad at night while working at Nortel, because as long as I passed my course, I got that course reimbursed. So I did my undergrad through the education program at Nortel. So thank you, Nortel, for my undergrad.
Amazing. Yeah, that makes me think a little bit, right? Like most of my career, I've worked for myself, so it's been a little bit different. But thinking about at least our team members at Guustomians, the ones who have been here the longest, we often hear from them that a big reason they love to, stay with the company is around the culture that we've built, as well as the people programs. And so, you touched on the education program at BlackBerry. What can you do to keep people if you can't afford significant raises? Like, what strategies have you seen work well in the past?
Seen and actually tried a few of them myself as I was leading rewards for some of those times in some of those companies, particularly at BlackBerry, where we were cutting a lot of spending and weren't doing raises, weren't doing bonuses, etc., and looking to still keep people engaged. So the one right off the top, we kept our recognition program as long as we could financially. We kept that program. We had a lot of debates about turning it into like a non-monetary program because of the costs, but eventually kept it as long as we could, as monetary as we could, because that was a way to immediately report people and kind of do that in a large way across a large number of people. So we definitely stayed invested in our recognition program. That was, but not an easy discussion and an easy thing to do when you're cutting other budgets. We did a lot of job development or job sharing or project sharing, where people could take opportunities to help other areas or even their own teams in projects or in work where there was a space that needed filling. And so even myself, I remember I took on a few people who were on secondment to help me with a project for a while from a completely different area like marketing, just because that person wanted to be interested, it was interested in that work. So I think if you can find ways to make people are doing good work and they're still engaged in the work they're doing, great. I think the tendency is to double down and be like, do more of the same job because we need it. And I think you have to find some ways to engage people in a different way there. And then you still have to, for me, you still have to keep the culture, what makes the environment alive. And that doesn't mean, for some people who have like, food on lunches and food and beer and all sorts of stuff, that might not be the right thing or be too costly, but you've got to find ways to still have people involved in stand-ups or involved in potlucks or whatever those things are that make the culture that you had before the financial challenges you might be going through, or the smaller budgets. There's a couple of things anyway.
Yeah, so it sounds like kind of really leaning into your culture is a great way to keep people engaged if you're not able to give significant raises. And
right.
You touched on something interesting, which was great to hear, that BlackBerry, stayed with their recognition program despite sort of financial woes.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because the studies show that, if you were to give somebody a 1% raise, it would create no impact. But, it's so small that people may not even notice the change on their, biweekly or monthly pay stub. However, if you're to invest 1% of payroll towards recognition, that investment alone can be transformative at an organization. And so it's really interesting and cool to hear that, you all invested heavily in recognition at BlackBerry despite some financial struggles.
Yeah. It's not easy to keep those type of programs, but you're bang on, Joe. Like that 1%, I've been in rooms where I've had to justify that spend. I've said 1% in a salary divided over 52 weeks or how many ever payroll cycles, taxed, etc. It's not that it's not meaningful, but it gets lost. That same 1%, that could be $400, $500, $1,000, whatever that right number is, given as recognition 1, 2, 3 times in the year as a lump, and when it's meaningful, way more impactful.
Totally. Okay, so let's stay on this thread just for a little bit longer. So aside from pay, what in your opinion is the most significant motivator of people at work?
The work itself. There's lots of programs, there are benefit programs, there are other programs that you could put in there that are important to people. But I think that what really, what people really get engaged in, especially as the world continues to evolve, I think as the work itself is what keeps people engaged, and working for someone that they can buy into, not necessarily the whole company's strategy. I know that's important too, and not knocking that, but I think people want to have a leader they can get behind and follow and believe in and jump on the ride with. And I think that's incredibly important. So between the work itself and the person that you're working with for as a leader, I think you need to both have to be meaningful to you for that to work.
And how important is it for an employee to believe in the purpose of the company?
Man, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. It is important, but for me, it's important, but it's also, for some people, it's one step removed for a lot of jobs, right? Some companies find that magic Kool-Aid that permeates the company, and everyone believes into the everyone's kind of tied into the company's bigger purpose. I've experienced that with Shopify in particular. Like, they did such a great job of tying everyone into the whole, supporting and being a part of entrepreneurs and supporting the entrepreneurial journey. But I think that was bigger than the individual teams, departments, managers, etc. goals. But that for me, that you don't see that often, right? And so it's important, but you've still got to have the direct work and people that they're working with still be, I think, trumps it on most jobs.
Again, staying with this theme around tight budgets.
Yep.
Which do you feel is more important, salaries or benefits? So if you're going through tough times, which one do you sacrifice first?
Salary or benefits?
Yeah.
Oh boy, that is a culture decision. That's a hard one. You can't cut salaries easily, so let's put that one aside because that's very hard to do. You can find some savings and benefits, though changing benefits always affects someone or some group of people more than you would expect or more than you know. And so it's difficult to pull back post-retirement benefits. So it's difficult to reduce the cap on dental or it's difficult to change those things because there's going to be some some group that's more affected and cares more about it. Although I do think that if it's a reasonable change in benefits, that's probably the way I would go before I would change on salaries.
And then rather than changing salaries, so rather than cutting salaries, just really limiting salary increases.
That's what I probably more refer to. Reducing salaries is very hard to do.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts around this sort of concept of, well, one, you hear a lot of companies are laying people off right now, especially in tech. And in large part, that could be due to mismanagement. And so what companies are doing, overspending, mismanagement. So what companies are doing is they are just cutting heads, right? There's a small, probably very small subset of companies that are going about it a little bit differently and saying, look, we need to cut spending rather than cutting jobs. We propose, everyone, including senior leaders, are taking a pay cut. Have you ever seen a scenario where that's been a successful sort of approach to reducing?
I've never been a part of anybody who's made the decision to do it. I've been in conversations as an option. For me personally, it's not something I'd advocate for. I think it's difficult to keep, if you've got 1,000 people and you can afford 800, taking everyone's salary down by 20% or try to get people reduced by 20% versus removing the 20% of people. I think it's both are harder decisions. My experience, I would go with removing the 200 people rather than everyone taking a cut, primarily because I think culture-wise, it's going to be painful. The actual reduction is going to be painful, but it'll end at some point. And versus if you've moved everyone down, I don't know when that pain stops for the 1,000 people. And that's, again, there are arguments both ways. That's where I would go.
And how would you feel if you got offered the ability to stay, but your pay was cut by 10 or 20%?
Probably the definition of quiet quitting. I would probably be, for like most people who have mortgages and bills and things to pay, the immediate answer would probably be yes. The longer term answer would be until I find something that was at the value I thought I was worth. And so I think I think most people, this is my concern with that approach, that I think it prolongs or it gives people an off board, but it does that for everyone. It doesn't do that for a subset of people. And so for me, I'd probably say yes, because I have people to care for. But after that, I would probably be looking.
Thinking about this concept of whether you trim headcount in tough economic times because you need to bring your spending down, or you're reducing pay and salary across the board. What about offering a pay reduction that comes along with a reduction in work hours? So for example, a 20% pay cut, but you're moving to a 4-day work week. Any thoughts around that?
I think there'll be some portion of your, like anything else, there'll be some portion of the people involved who would be happy with that change. Those people who can, to be very frank, afford the financial change, but also be happy with the increased probably life, time that they have. And so there will be some people who will be happy in that situation. There'll be some people who will say, they needed the 20% pay for their life, for their finances, right? And so I think it's an interesting option to give to people, especially when the work is there. I think doing any of these things in broad, like we're going to do this to everyone, is really, I would shy away from, right? There may be some people that their work is like that, their lifestyle might be that way. And you may want to approach them or approach that option for them. And there might be people you give the option to in general, knowing that most won't take it or couldn't take it. But there are some people, especially some people in the workforce who are earlier in their careers who may be very happy to have 3 days and be able to work for 4 and have 3 off.
If you have to cut benefits, how do you do it without having a significant impact on morale?
That's a great question. I think this is about communication, not about what you've cut. And so assuming you're cutting something reasonable, that's understandable, people can understand the logic behind it. I think for the most part, it's about communicating, people being really transparent about what you've changed and why, and the impact of it, right? And quite frankly, most benefit cycles or benefits renew, we're, as HR leaders, we're making this decision anyway. It may not be broad and be a larger number, but every time we go through this renewal process, we're all looking at where's the spend being used, where can we be more effective with that spend? Are we keeping it the same way? And so we're doing this normally. We're just not doing it in large chunks where everyone notices that we've removed something or we've reduced something.
In the spirit of times are tough economically, and maybe the coffers are not filled with cash that are ready to deploy into big raises. And so if a company is thinking about finding other ways to engage their people, show them that they care, and looking to sort of like invest in people programs, can you think about any people programs that are extremely high value right? So like the amount that we need to invest in that program and sort of the perceived value by the employee is tremendous. Can you think of any that are extremely impactful?
So learning and development, you usually can do that, and you can affect more people. You can affect a lot of people with a smaller investment. And I think true learning development meets my 2 cents. Generally, not these like here's access to a website with 100 courses. I think that's good, but not as impactful. Bonus programs work well when they're properly aligned, but I know that's still cash, but it's always cash if you've achieved what you need to achieve. That works really well. I'm going to say recognition, but I don't want to say it just people think I'm just saying it. Recognition does have an outstretched return for me, so I think recognition does really well there. The challenge, what I'm thinking through, is that a lot of the programs that might a lot of the culture programs being around time off or food or other engagement activities, those are also hard to do in that time because you need that from the team to probably go through the troubles you're having, right? And so it's difficult to say those programs have high returns, but they're usually not really great or feasible options at the time when you've got challenges, right? So for me, if you have to strip down to bare bones, you've got to pay, you've got to have some benefits, definitely keep recognition.
Love it.
Joe, question for you.
Yeah, hit me.
I mean, the topic one can never feel, it's a heavy one. Whenever you're talking about smaller budgets, you're usually talking about constriction or, not doing bonuses or salary issues or taking away support benefits. It's a difficult topic. It's a difficult one, which creates a lot of tension in companies. I'm sure I shared a lot of opinions. Are there any that you thought, okay, he's out to lunch, or I wouldn't have done it that way? I'm curious, and it doesn't have to be that negative. But I'm curious for anything, and we can rephrase this question, Kyle, if it's not so long-winded. I'm just figuring out how to word it. But are there anything that you were like, you know what, that's a different approach. I wouldn't have gone that way.
I don't know that you've said anything that I have a grossly different opinion on.
Yeah,
I think that your comments around meaningful work, creating loyalty through great leadership, all those things apply in my mind. And I'm also a very big believer in the culture side and people programs that can have sort of like outsized benefits versus salary. Now, I think that as a baseline, you have to pay people appropriately, right? Like people paid within the appropriate band that they're in. But if economic headwinds are such that there's a recession and you're doing everything you can to not lay people off, I do think that investing in culture and investing in people programs is a great way to, keep morale high and show people that you care about them, because people do want to know that a company and their leader and manager cares about them personally. And so if you can do those things, I really do think that you can create an environment where people want to stay, even if you're not paying at the top of the band, for example. So I think you made some great points, and I think for the most part, I'm in agreement with you. You highlighted learning and development as an area where people can extract a lot of value. I see that for sure. People want to continue to learn and grow, and if you can support them to do that and help them a career path and give them sort of line of sight into how to continue to evolve as a work person, then I think there's tremendous benefit there. So
for me, I know Joe is a big energy guy, and I know this topic, I was like, this is not one of the fun ones, right? Just because it's never fun going through these times. And for HR leaders like myself, you're making really hard decisions that are affecting people's lives. And sometimes at scale, it's not easy, right? And so it almost feels like there's never a right answer, but you've got to make a decision to some things. And so doing the best you can, I think, is hard in these situations. But I do think fight for the plan that you've made. If you made a plan and it includes keeping recognition, you fight for that plan and do your best with it. If it includes learning development, then you fight for that. It's really difficult when you don't have a plan and you just keep cutting and cutting and cutting, and you end up in a place you're not happy, right?
If you want to create a culture that no one wants to leave, check out Culture is the Ultimate Advantage, our free guide to creating a work environment that attracts, engages, and retains people. Click the link in the description to get your copy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to recognize someone for a job well done today. Mucho gusto.